Hello. The chapter 5 of our book, Introduction to Sociology, aims to deal with six topics related to the subject of culture in sociological thought. These are explaining the fundamentals of culture, identifying key concepts such as tradition, ethnocentrism, cultural relativity, or cultural determinism, explaining how culture is addressed by different approaches in classical sociology, analyzing how culture is interpreted by contemporary critical approach, evaluate the cultural interactions and cultural diversity, and lastly, analyzing how globalization takes place at cultural level. To explain fundamentals of culture, this chapter first of all provides you a brief account of what we mean when we talk about culture in sociology. Briefly saying, culture is a system of beliefs and customs, which a group of people uses to understand, organize their individual and collective lives. Culture makes our life consistent and provides resources that lead us to give our world a meaning. Cultural values and various sets of beliefs steer us in life to one or another direction. Culture includes many material and spiritual elements of human life. So, when we briefly point out that culture is everything that gives shape, meaning, and content to life and human activity beyond the fulfillment of biological needs. When we look at some key concepts frequently used in cultural studies and sociology, we can see concepts such as traditions, ethnocentrism, cultural relativity, cultural determinism, or cultural lack. Tradition corresponds to a practice that comes from a real or imaginary past and is transmitted from generation to generation. It is a set of historically with period practices that are consistent with the past. Ethnocentrism, on the other hand, is the evolution and judgment of other cultures from the value system of one's own culture and based on one's own cultural values. Cultural relativity is the idea that cultures must be evaluated and judged in their own terms, and that cultures cannot be judged externally. Cultural determinism expresses that the cultures are very strong and thus cannot be changed, and the individuals involved in it are kind of slaves. Sometimes there is a delay when the changes in the material culture are followed by spiritual cultures, such as law, customs, traditions, social mentality, and so forth. This delay is called cultural lag. As we look at how culture is dealt with in different sociological approach, we see a diversity in approaching the issue of culture. Functional sociology, particularly Durkheim, suggests that cultures originate from organizations of social structure or needs, and he focuses on the functions of culture in social unity and integration. Durkheim attaches an important role to culture, especially in the formations of social stability. For this reason, he cannot explain the role of culture in creating social conflict and social exclusion. In addition to this, Durkheim and his functionalist perspective largely ignores the relations of power or interest, which are quite important in social life. On the other hand, Marxist sociology, particularly Marx himself, advocates approaching culture as a part of superstructure and considers it as an ideology. Marx stated that all cultural ideas are reflections of material production system and thus serve the interest of the dominant class. The importance of Marx's ideas is in associating culture systematically with economic life, the dominant class, and power. Chapter 5 of our book, Introduction to Sociology, also talk about certain contemporary approaches to culture in sociology. One of them is Frankfurt School. According to Frankfurt School, modern mass culture became key instrument of ideological dominations of capitalism in the 20th century. The cultural structure that reproduced the capitalist system is called mass culture, affirmative culture, or culture industry. With the concept of cultural hegemony, Gramsci points out the cultural and moral orientations of the vast majority of public by the ruling class. The hegemony takes place mainly through superstructures, that is, culture is an important area of hegemonic struggle. British cultural studies conceptualized culture as a dynamic and constantly renewing process. It doesn't approach to culture as a fixed, static, and invariant system. Sociologists in British cultural studies also didn't accept culture as a unifying system or a shared set of values, but described it as a field of struggle and conflict. This chapter, the chapter 5 of Introduction to Sociology, after discussing culture in relation to certain contemporary approach, it turns to cultural interaction and cultural diversity in today's global world. Today, as globalization and the phenomenon of immigration gains significant momentum, cultures have become more and more open to others. People interact with different cultures and can learn new things about them. There are many other lifestyles and cultures that are different from our own lifestyles and culture. There are billions of people living in different geographical regions, practicing different religions, speaking different languages, and having different lifestyles. This shows us that there are different ways of being human, different forms of belief and behavior, and different ways of life in the daily life compared to ours. Such an observation demonstrates us there is not only a single culture, but different cultures, not only in the world or another geography, in our world and another geography, but also different worlds of life and different countries and different societies. Indeed, within each society, there are different cultures and different ways of life. The diversity of cultures keeps us informed of the diversity within our own cultures as well. Lastly, the chapter 5 turns to discuss how globalization takes place at the cultural level. There are two answers for the question asking whether the global expansion and the success of many American-based brands generally point out to the globalization of culture. According to a number of theoreticians, the process of cultural globalization simply occurs in the form of cultural imperialism. These theoreticians argue that different local and national cultures have been destroyed, especially by the encirclement of the American culture industry. On the other hand, according to another group of theoreticians, cultural globalization is a process in which heterogenizations as much as homogenizations, localizations as much as universalizations, modernizations as much as traditionalizations. Therefore, globalization shouldn't be interpreted only as cultural homogenizations. It's a process which contains universalism, homogeneity, and uniqueness, as well as a process that brings them together and transforms them into one another. Thank you for watching.